Okay. So, consent is my favorite topic in the whole world, and I wish it was for more of us. I like to nerd out on it. I'm taking this. I'm taking this back because I believe that some of the difficulty that we have, the gray areas we have with consent when it comes to sexuality, is because we're really quite poor at practicing it in our day to day life. Like, I mean, just take yourself. You don't have to take yourself anywhere. Just think about this pandemic. How many times have you been in the grocery store and someone did the reach around, assuming, even though it's supposed to be 6 feet? Maybe you were comfortable with it. Maybe you weren't. Maybe you felt discomfort, but you didn't feel like you could say anything because technically you were wearing masks or whatever. How many times? I've heard some people say that they're actually relieved about some of the conditions with the pandemic because they don't have to hug everybody, which begs the question, why are we hugging people that we don't want to hug? But we all do it, right? So we can normalize that. Yeah, how many times do you want to just be polite? So if we're going to talk about consent when it comes to sexuality, it also has, it's feeding back into our people-pleasing tendency. And it's feeding back into where that comes from, which is like we want to belong, we want to be loved, we want to be accepted. So we don't want to be the thorn in anyone's side. We don't want to be difficult. We don't want to be, like that's uncomfortable. Now, as someone who said no to a hug before, I can tell you, it's uncomfortable for all parties involved. But it also felt good. It felt in integrity. And when I practice it in my outside life space, then when I'm in physical intimacy with someone, I'm way more likely to pull on those skills to use. Because if we wait until we're in the moment of very intense energy, which is usually what intimacy is, any kind of sexuality, anything, the energy is just, it's a lot, it's up there. If we wait until that moment to start practicing these skills that are already super difficult, we might not be that successful. And I say this with a lot of tenderness on both sides. For those of us who don't actually know how to ask for other people's consent, and for those of us who don't know how to hold ourselves to, like, I don't actually want to do this, or I'm not a full yes to this, but I don't even know how to articulate that nuance of I'm not a no, but I'm not a yes. So practicing. Let me just give like a concrete scale. I like to use with myself and with people that I work with a scale of willingness. Because instead of it just being a yes, no, which is sometimes really hard for us to feel into our bodies, we're like, I kind of want to. Or like, that's not the exact thing I want, but I don't want to say no because then I think this whole interaction is going to end. And I don't want that either. So scale of willingness allows us, and we don't have to say this out loud. This could be something we can do internally. I like to use extreme scales. So 0 is hell no, go fuck yourself. 10 is I'm so excited. This is exactly the thing that I'd want to be doing right now. I'm so glad you asked. 5 is like, meh. So somewhere in there, for myself and for other people, I give the permission. If it drops below a 5, it's a no for now. If I'm less than a meh, then it's just not something I really want to do right now. It doesn't mean I won't want to do it in 10 minutes. It doesn't mean I'll never want to do it. It's too blasé. Anywhere from blasé to traumatic to like, definitely not. And then if I'm a 6 or a 7, so I'm like slightly above meh, but I'm interested. I'm curious. Maybe it's not like, yes, I'm so excited for this thing. That's 100% what I want to do. So going back to the hug, sometimes I do this with hugs. If someone asks me for a hug and I'm like, I could or I couldn't, and I check with my body, I'm like, you know what? That wouldn't feel bad for me right now. It feels maybe more like you're an enthusiastic hug, yes. And I might not be there, but I'm also like, yeah, I could do a hug. Then that feels okay. I feel an integrity. I don't feel like I crossed my boundaries. It wasn't a heck yes, but also wasn't a heck no. So that's my preliminary how I roll with consent through my whole life. And I encourage you to, especially during this pandemic, it's super hard for us to speak up sometimes. And we fight, flight, freeze, fawn, all of those are real. So our system can get overwhelmed and we won't actually have the words. We may go along with something because our nervous system is in freeze and we don't actually know what to do with that. That's something we can offer our self-compassion around because it's a biological thing that's happening. It's an animalistic animal kingdom thing that's happening. So if we practice this stuff when we're not in that triggered state, when we're not in a sexual situation, especially if we're some kind of relationship where we feel like there's dynamics there where we owe them something or anything like that. If we can practice this in the line at CVS and say, you're a little too close, would you mind backing up? You're a little bit close for my comfort. If we can practice it with friends, I give this for time limits. I'd love to connect, but I know energy-wise, all I have is 15 minutes. And then we can just be clear and we can just start to practice. Like, how can I practice my consent out of non-sexual situations so that when I get into sexual situations, I will have more practice under my belt and it will come up easier. I'll feel it in my body and I will have the language around it. Okay.